in Saginaw, where you'll find everything you need for home decorating at Westside Decorating Center. Good morning to you on this kind of dreary Thursday morning. It's been a little wet outside this morning, although I'm sure the farmers are appreciating the moisture. It is Juneteenth. We're going to talk about that in just a couple of moments, but later on after the 10 o'clock news, Pam Good is going to be with us. She was pointed my way by Paul White, probably one of the most positive people I know. And we'll be talking to Pam after the 10 o'clock news. And then at 11 o'clock, Ken Buck from Buck Insurance will be along. We'll talk a little bit of insurance with Ken. But as I mentioned, this is Juneteenth. And who better to talk about it this morning than a man who knows a thing or two about it and also does an occasional show here on WSGW called Shades of Gray. He is the one and only Kareem Bowen. Good morning, Kareem.
Good morning, Iris. Good to be back with you. I'm a little tongue-tied out here with all of this rain.
No, this is radio. You're not supposed to be tongue-tied.
It happens.
I know it. I've known Kareem a while, and so I know that we can have a conversation about almost anything.
Yeah.
And we have. That's what makes it fun. So I think we're going to start with a history of Juneteenth, how it came about, and what it's all about, for those that don't know.
Well, you'd be surprised, Art. There's so many people, and this part of history just has not been shared abroad. Over the past, I would say, 5-6 years, the awareness of it has really grown. But Juneteenth is the emancipation of all Negro slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation, we know, in 1863 was signed by Abraham Lincoln on January 1st of that year. And it was basically the decree that said that all African-American slaves, all slavery was abolished in America, right, in the way we understood it. And that went on. So people would think that the Emancipation Proclamation set off slaves free. Technically it did. But in actuality, many of the southern states that were a part of the Confederacy continued. They were trying to get those crops out, those products out. And for 2.5 years, they continued to enslave and to be on plantations and to do those things until June 19th, 1865, 2.5 years later. General Granger Gordon goes into Texas on horse with soldiers from the Union, and he reads the edict that all slaves were officially free throughout the country. And that set a number of people. That was in Galveston, Texas, where he went in, and it set everyone free. And so it is a celebration of freedom of all African-American slaves and descendants of slaves.
And so we understand the states in the South where they had crops that they were having to harvest and things of that nature. Yeah. When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, did they continue to operate in the exact same way they did before it, or was there some freedom given? What was the atmosphere like for them?
That's a good question. Things continued. And so it's like, if you don't know, you don't know.
All right, that's what I wanted
to if you don't know, you don't know. And so that was the premise for Gordon Granger going down with those soldiers and saying, hey, we've abolished slavery. You all have continued to operate. So send some troops down there to let them know that this has been, that it's over.
Let me ask, it's often been said that to control a population, keep them from being educated.
Absolutely.
Was that the case for slaves, or were they provided some kinds of education?
Well, no, that exactly was the case. There are a couple of things that have to happen for what would happen in American slavery. One, we have to first of all dehumanize an individual, because you can't really treat someone with the type of treatment that took place historically with them being an equal or a human. So there was a dehumanization, but then there was also a removal of a person's ability to speak their language, because you no longer have the ability to communicate. And then also it was against the law to teach slaves to read. So that is where we come into an Enlightenment picture, part of our culture, where our history, where we see individuals like Booker T. Washington, who taught himself to read, B.D. Du Bois, that went and they learned to read on themselves by themselves, and they began to teach others to read. That's where the historically black colleges and universities come from, was the fact that if we're not going to be allowed to read and you're not going to teach us, we'll teach ourselves. And so they began, because they weren't allowed to go to those institutions at the time, creating those historic institutions so that they could then teach themselves to read and begin to understand the importance of education. I grew up as a young man here in the city of Saginaw. Bishop Pryor of Victorious Believers Ministries, I was under his ministry for 26 years, and what he would say.
Really?
Yeah. That's where
Chris
I came
doesn't
from.
look that old.
Yeah, the years are clicking. And one of the things that we always said that we were taught as kids was that salvation plus education equals success. So it is a very important reason. It's one of the reasons why, when I look at the state of where we are today, with Michigan being one of the most illiterate states in the union, ranking number one in terms of the number of young people and adults who are illiterate, it's problematic. So education is essential to a person's economic development and their ability to really succeed in the nation.
It's a paradox. And
Absolutely.
The reason I say that is Michigan spends more money per student than almost any state in the union, and our results are near the bottom of the barrel. It's not always money.
No, and it's not always money. But I will say that there is where the money is spent. And so there are a lot of educational institutions that have a great deal of funding that's available, but it's how that money is spent, who's teaching those kids that are in there, and being able to connect is a fundamental piece of that.
And what are they teaching? And here's why I say that.
Okay.
It's my understanding, and I'm not an educator, I don't pretend to be one, but my understanding is, for a long time here in Michigan, a lot of school districts taught to the test rather than the subject.
Okay.
Because the state set these parameters and said, you got to do this, rather than letting people in the district decide for themselves what they want to teach. And, when you teach to the test, you don't teach the subject.
Well, I think that there's something that districts understand and states also understand when you talk about those numbers of illiteracy, because it's important to also understand that the issues that exist that keep young people, we can spend money on education, but if we're not dealing with the issues that an individual has at a base level, it impacts everything. We are also a food desert, this almost the entire state. So when families don't have food to eat, going to school and get an education becomes secondary. When we're trying to figure out where we're going to lay our head and have affordable housing, if we're going to have a place to live, education becomes a secondary. So we have to deal, when you look at Maslow's law and you understand those base needs that have to be met before education even becomes a necessity, it's important to take all of those things into account. So looking at how things, I think that communities should be empowered with education. I think that the state has the responsibility, and we have the state president here for education, Dr. Pugh. She's been doing an amazing job of not just looking at things from a macroscopic look, but also looking internally. What are the issues and the needs and the concerns, and how does policy affect those on a local level?
So I would say to you, if you lined up 10 youngsters.
Absolutely.
And we learned their stories. This one roams the streets. This one hits the books. This one does that. I could tell you which one had parental support.
Okay.
Because to me, the critical issue in education is parental support.
Absolutely.
Parents who motivate their kids to go to school, do what needs to be done. And those families that don't. And it crosses ethnic, racial, you name the borders. I mean, it's as true in the white communities as in the black community. If parents aren't involved and their kids don't care, they don't get educated.
And you're tapping into exactly kind of the philosophy that I had before. When we talk about celebrating Juneteenth, we're talking about the ability and the freedom to really pursue for the first time, this proverbial American dream that we talk about. And so when we look at those statuses and those situations, educational support is almost tied intricately and undeniably tied to parental support, right? So when we look at communities where a parent has to work 2 or 3 jobs, it's not just that they're not showing up because they don't want to be there sometimes, but sometimes it's like I have to work, and being at school is not something that I'm provided. When we look at the fact that, the degradation of a family, the family culture is a major part. And I think that is a conversation that has to be brought into this conversation of education. But I think that when we look at one thing that I always say this, and I look at the statistics because data doesn't lie. When we look at families in African American communities, and we look at most families, fathers are very present. As a matter of fact, African American fathers are probably more present, according to statistics, than any other place. They may not necessarily be married, but they're present in their children's lives.
And I would bet you in non-African American communities, that's not the image.
Absolutely. And it's not. But the thing that I'm saying about this is, so parents being present is important. Parents being active is a whole nother question or a statement.
Yes. I
agree. Where we are today, I mean, housing, when you look at what it costs to have a house or somewhere that is suitable for living, it's no longer a situation in which
it's not getting any better.
It's not. And so those things are very important when we talk about education and how we are able to really better the issues of literacy and things of that nature. So, as I work with a lot of young people and the issues that we have to deal with, we just had our first graduating quarter of Dow Treasure Academy. Those young people were provided a lot of opportunities and access, awareness barriers. Just even knowing that things exist is a big thing. But then dealing with those kids, we see these success stories and what comes out of that. But when you deal with the issues that are at home, when you deal with the issues of young people, parents not being in the same place, you deal with the issues of young people not feeling safe in their homes. All of those things are a part of the educational environment that they shouldn't necessarily be.
I've got to take a break and we'll be back. It's Juneteenth and we're talking to Kareem Bowen. We'll have more when we return here on the Art Lewis Show. I want to chat with you for a minute about McDonald Ford in Freeland. Lots of wonderful cars on their lot, and they are tariff-free cars. And not only are they tariff-free, but Ford has employee pricing going on right now. That means you pay the same price as Ford employees. And in addition, maybe you're a Chrysler import buyer, you're considering a Ford, but you're not sure about it. Well, I'd go check them out because you're going to receive the lowest price offered. And Chevy truck buyers can now think about getting into a Ford F-150, the best-selling pickup in America. Also, at employee pricing, which, by the way, Ford has announced they will extend through July 6th. So you see, right now is the right time to visit McDonald Ford M47 in Freeland for the best selection, lowest possible price. Don't let tariffs prevent you from getting the vehicle of your choice at a price you can afford. Visit McDonald Ford in Freeland today. Remember, tariff-free and employee pricing for everyone. And also, just as a little heads up, we're coming into, and we're actually in, allergy season. So in the next couple of days, we are going to be talking about FrigiFresh. Remember that? It goes into your air conditioning system in your car and keeps your car safe from all those nasty allergens and things of that nature. We'll be telling you more about that coming up in the next couple of days. Meantime, we're going to take a break, come back, and we'll have more with Kareem Bowen on the other side.
If you have summer plans,
This is a test of the emergency.
All right, we're back with you here on the Art Lewis Show. Kareem Bowen in studio with me, Juneteenth, as we celebrate the finality, if you will, technically anyway, the finality of slavery.
Yes.
I have to ask this, board. I have amongst my many friends minority members who are very, very successful. A chemist who is an executive at Dow, yourself, others I know, banking executives, what have you. What was it about your upbringing or their upbringing that allowed them to see no barriers and succeed, while others seem to not be able to get through the barriers?
Yeah. And that's a good question. I think a lot of people often like, what is the key thing that makes a difference? And I can speak from my experience. For me, it was a lot of support. Growing up in the community that I did, there was a lot of community. It wasn't just family, but it was the entire neighborhood. It was the village, so to speak, of individuals that made sure that we were, first of all, doing what we should do, becoming good citizens. Then they were also making sure that we were taking care of business both in school and in the neighborhood. And so it was that concept. You know, there's an African proverb that we've heard a million times that it takes a village to raise a child. And I came from a very strong village of support and individuals who help support not only my family, because I grew, even though I was raised in a single parent home. And this is why I say that we can't just say that it's a family. I was raised in a single parent home to a mother. My mom is 20 years older than I am. So statistically, I should be a statistic. I should be what other people should say in terms when you look at the elements of society. However, it was the idea and the concept of village, where there were family members and surrogates and coaches and people that were concerned not just about their four, but about the other individuals in the village that needed support.
And, you know, and it would be fair to say, and I don't know her, did not know her, but it would be fair to say that she was a caring, loving woman who wanted to see her son succeed.
And I think that that's where most parents are.
I would hope so.
Yeah, and I say this, and when I say that, I also mean this. I don't think that anybody grows up in life and says, you know, I want to be down and out. I want to be addicted to drugs. I want to be an alcoholic or any of those things. And so I think that every parent has a desire to see their children be better than who they were. I was blessed because my family not only had a strong sense of community, but my family also they were blessed to have skills, and they were blessed to be able to read. My grandfather only completed school until the third grade. So he had a third grade education, but he desired that his children would have a better life than he did. And so he pushed education. He pushed empowerment through understanding and awareness. And so there was just basic things that we were exposed to as kids. And then coming into the environment, when we first got to this area, there were not very many white folks that were living in the community where my grandfather raised his kids. But it was the access, the opportunity, the exposure, the consistency, the family and the community dynamic that made that possible.
That word consistency is important.
Yeah. I always say consistency over time builds trust. So whenever we have consistent long-term engagement, we are able, that's what mentoring is to me. I don't understand it under any other preface than it has to be consistent long-term engagement. That's how change happens.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a quick break, come back. We're talking to Kareem Bowen. Juneteenth today, a lot of the banks, post offices closed, federal holiday.
It's natural to have questions.
Back with you, in studio with me, Kareem Bowen. Today is Juneteenth. As sometimes I hate to use the word celebrate when it comes to holidays, but I guess we are celebrating the official End of slavery.
Yeah, Art, I don't understand. What's the problem with celebrating holidays? Isn't that what we do?
I really have a problem sometimes with the word celebrate and how we use it, and then how we go about our business.
Yeah.
Because we don't do the celebration,
Yeah. No, but this is definitely a celebration. It's a celebration of freedom. It's a celebration of opportunity. It's a celebration of awareness.
All right. So have we achieved it?
I think that we are now getting to a place, that's an interesting question, because when we look at Juneteenth, and you and I were talking, and at the top of the show, you made the suggestion, like, where have you been if you don't know about Juneteenth? But the reality of it is, so much of African American history and those who are descendants of slaves has not been put in the history books with American history. And it is American history. I hate when I see our country say, that's a part of black history. Well, black history is American history. It's a fundamental part of American history.
Well, here's how I view it, and I hope you would agree with me. If you try and rewrite history,
right,
or bury it, you don't learn from it.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's a tragedy if you take a very important part of American history at a very important time of this nation and don't teach it. It makes no sense to me, but that's me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. My 7th grade history teacher, Mr. Baldwin, he would always start every class by saying, "What is history?" And eventually we would know it's records of the past. And he'd ask the question, "What's the purpose of history?" To learn from past mistakes. And so I think that it's very important. But, sometimes, Art, and I certainly understand, we have a very interesting, it's an amazing history, but there's some very ugly parts to our history.
Absolutely.
And I think that sometimes there are those who feel that history and the truth of what happened, because we were not here, because we were not, people who were a part of that part of history, that, why do we go back? Because it's so damaging. We don't want people to feel bad. But the fact of the matter is that it happened. It was history. And there are people that are now living today that deal with the impact of that history on a daily basis. And there are people that live today that have a privilege that existed from that history. And so we have to understand that history is not complete unless it celebrates everyone's history, from the very least to the greatest in terms of how we see things, from African Americans to Hispanic Americans to Jewish Americans, and those all in between. It is American history. And I think that is what makes America amazing, is that we have such a diverse history. Whether it's good or bad, it's our history.
Yeah, we talked today, immigration is on the table, obviously.
Absolutely.
And when you think about this country, we were built by immigrants.
Absolutely.
However, they came through legally.
Well, you asked that question, and we talk about that, and I'm a person who believes that we do have to have border security, and those things are important. But you said it perfectly. Like, everyone that is here, for the most part, immigrated here. And then we put in laws and regulations to determine what was American and what was un-American, and who got in and who didn't get in. So I think that it's interesting, because that question, I think is one that we'll debate till the end of time.
Yeah, I think so
but
too.
But you're right. We have to be a nation who has laws and who has borders, and those things are good for everybody.
All right, so let me ask you this. Juneteenth, we celebrate the final emancipation, if
Yes.
you will. Have we achieved the goal of what was set out to be done at the end of emancipation? That is allowing acceptance into society for a group that were oppressed.
I'm going to say this. I think that in terms of what freedom looks like, for the most part, there are still tentacles of the ideologies that existed before that yet exist. And I don't think that in America those things will ever be done with. And I say that because in order to really undo completely what exists, that means that you would have to undo the entire system and the infrastructure and start over again. So and that's not happening, right? The Constitution of America was in existence since 1776. At that time, Americans, all Americans weren't created equal. The black man was considered to be only 1/3, 2/3 human, and he didn't become human until after those documents and all of this took place. So I think we're doing great job at trying to bring certain things. I think that with the current situation and the current administration, there has been what many African Americans and many minorities might say been a retrograde in terms of the types of freedoms and an attack on some of the things and freedoms that have existed. A re-celebration, and I know you hate the word celebration, of things that are part of the.
That's how it's used. I mean,
I mean, but just going back and why would you return statues that represent or to a lot of people things that are damaging? Yes, it is history, and if we're going to celebrate it, it's history.
That
so
would
we're
be
going
my
to
point. It's
so
history.
So if it's history, let's celebrate the entire meaning. So some of these statues that are of generals that we celebrate were actually,
oppressors.
They were oppressors,
Yeah.
and they were against what the American government was becoming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But is it any different if I'm to bury black history and not teach it in a classroom?
No.
Is it any different than taking a statue and tearing it down and ignoring who that person was and learning from the mistakes of that time?
Well, you know what? I think that this is the key. I think that when we look at things as to where they are and what they meant in their true existence, when we look at, General Lee or some of these other generals that are out there in these statutes, let's make them exactly what they are. Let's tell the whole truth of their oppression, what they did and how they were. And if people choose to celebrate it, that is absolutely their right. But I think that we have to do a better job of telling those stories of individuals that were a part of how we became a free nation. Tell the truth about the stories. I mean, if we were looking at really the Emancipation Proclamation, it was not the fact that Abraham Lincoln was like, hey, let's free the slaves. They should be free. And it wasn't the fact that the entire fight against it was about anything other than slavery. That was the commodity that we had. Let's tell the stories that, yes, there were cotton plantations and there were sugarcane plantations and tobacco plantations, but there were also plantations that people don't know about. One of the greatest plantations that was of the most value here in America were breeding plantations, and that most people don't even hear about those. What are breeding plantations? These were places where they actually were breeding slaves.
New slaves.
To work.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to talk about it, I just want us to be able to celebrate American history in the fullness of American history. Let's tell kids that, most of the major buildings in our Washington corridor, our Capitol building, were built by slaves. And there was no retribution. There were no payments for those things. As a matter of fact, they paid the plantation owners for the work that the slaves done. So I believe that American history is beautiful and colorful, and I think that we become a better nation when we embrace the entirety of it.
Amen. All right, we'll take a break, come back, finish up as our conversation continues with Kareem Bowen.
Welcome to
And we're back with you in studio with me, Kareem Bowen. I want to go back, Kareem, to something we talked about a little earlier in family structure and all of that. I have a theory that I'll lay upon you, and that is that the current situation in America with family structure breaking down in many, many places, I trace back to the 60s and flower power. And how youngsters then didn't know how to teach their kids how to be parents, who then didn't know how to teach their kids to be parents, and generationally we end up where we are today with a lot of people not knowing how to be parents.
Yeah.
And that's a big brush. I don't paint it across everyone because there are many great parents out there. But I just think as a